1. So first, some context. My parents live in some very forested area in southern France, pretty much in the middle of nowhere. And when I say in, I say that we have to go through a kilometer of dirt road to get to our house. I spend most of my year in some rainy city up north, so I try to enjoy the nature and stuff whenever I come by for holidays. And because it's so hot during the day, I'm not afraid of the dark or animals. I've met boars numerous times and always slowly backed off, no problem at all. I often walk around at night. Now, mind that even though I walk on small paths in the middle of the forest, I had no light. First, because I knew the forest and surrounding area like the back of my hand, but also because I didn't want to meet sketchy people at night in the forest. So whenever I would go out, I'd take my big black mantle reaching down to the ankles, black boots, black gloves, black hat and sunglasses, so I could duck in the vegetation and remain virtually invisible if people approached. So here I was in the middle of the summer, taking a nice little walk on a small path in the forest, in slightly hilly terrain at around 1 a.m. The weather was clear and I could easily see my surroundings. And since we're far away from major cities, you can see the stars pretty well in such clear weather. So I looked up to try to see some stars through the leaves going uphill. At some point there was a sharp turn, thick vegetation masking the rest of the path, so I didn't notice the headlight coming towards me. And of course, since I didn't have any light, the incoming cyclist, who probably simply enjoyed cycling at night, who knows, almost crashed into me when he turned and basically rammed the vegetation, trying to avoid me. I was startled, but froze and just stared at him through the sunglasses, while he got a hold of his bike and stood back up facing me. He was clearly larger and more muscular than I am, yet he looked completely terrified, probably because I was dressed in a very sketchy way and had no light. Now for some reason I was quite amused by the fact that someone like him could be afraid by the feeble me, so I just grinned without saying a word and chuckled a bit. Now he stared at me with an even more terrified expression and got back on his bike in haste, still looking toward me. So I realized how creepy what I just did was. Freaked out a bit and decided I had to say something normal to make him calm down or something. In the end, I unintentionally did something even creepier. I stopped chuckling and smiling all at once when he got on his bike and said in a neutral voice, "Lovely night, isn't it?" That was the first normal thing that came through my mind, and for some reason, I just blurted it out like that. Of course, he didn't even answer and rode off pretty fast, and I just stood there looking at him drive away, before noticing that his white plastic bottle, there usually is a spot where you can place those on bikes, had fallen off his bike. So I yell, "Wait!" after him, but he's more or less out of range already. Forest soak up sounds pretty well, so maybe he just heard me yelling. Now, here's the thing. As I said, I know the woods like the back of my hand, so I know that unless he wanted to take small impractical paths that would take him hours to get anywhere, he would come back on the main path he was on. And said path had, at some point, a series of sharp turns, including the one which I had met the man. When you got past those turns, you had the impression that you had turned right, whereas you actually turned around. So if I was to cut through woods, I could be at the spot he would presumably be at in about 15 minutes. If he was fast, in 5 minutes to give him his bottle back. So I did that, and hoped he would actually come this way, before realizing that he may go violent if I was there, if he freaked out or something. So I just left the bottle in the middle of the road, and went back home after going on the path I was on again. I wonder what his reaction was when he found the bottle in the middle of the road, if he really did go that way. As unless he properly looked at a map before, he would have had the impression that I somewhat teleported ahead of him, or ran faster than he could ride. Now that all is said and done, I'm glad he was a rather normal person, as we have plenty of weird and crazy ones around. Once met a pretty old and fairly creepy hunter that jokingly said he'd have more fun hunting me than boars, while pointing his goddamn rifle at me. 2. I don't know if many of you remember this, but back in 2016 was a creepy clown trend. where people dressed as creepy and killer clowns would hang out in places after dark or stalk people. My story takes place on my college campus during fall of that year. I lived with my grandparents before leaving for school, and I am extremely close to them. Also, I am very shy and had zero friends or people I regularly hung out with at school. I wanted to reach out and meet new folks, so I signed up for a salsa dancing club that met on Friday nights. I told my grandma over the phone, and she was happy I was putting myself out there. She asked if I was going with anybody. No, I told her. I'm just going to go by myself. Are you sure? She asked. Don't any of your roommates want to go? The idea of talking to my roommates terrified me. I could handle structured gatherings, but personal conversations left more room for my awkwardness to creep in. No, they're not here. I don't want you walking around campus by yourself at night. I thought my grandma was just being overprotective. Grandma, it's fine. The streets are well lit, and it's only a 10-minute walk. It's perfectly safe. Well, if you're not going with anybody, call me and let me talk to you on the phone as you walk back. I agreed. That evening was incredibly fun, learning the basic steps and dancing to upbeat Latin tunes. At around 10:30, I felt ready to head back to my dorm, so I snuck out of the building and headed toward my dorm. Although the paved path I was walking on was lit by streetlights, it seemed darker than usual. In addition, the entire campus was deserted. Normally, there were quite a few kids my age wandering around, but that night there was not a soul to be seen. I dialed my grandma and made small talk with her as I walked. I took my heels off and carried them in my free hand. Now the path I was walking on went past a stretch of sidewalk that was perpendicular to the one I was taking. Under one of the streetlights about 10 meters away, I noticed a lone figure standing with his back toward me. The figure, hearing me chatting on the phone, slowly turned towards me. He was tall and heavy-set, with red hair, and appeared to be wearing light blue pajamas. His face was obscured by a killer clown mask. The mask was stark white with dark black eye sockets and a twisted, malicious grin. Time seemed to suddenly slow way down. The clown did not move toward me, he simply stood there staring. I knew I had to think fast. I contemplated my options. I could A, scream like a little girl and run, B, approach him and confront him, or C, pretend he didn't scare me. The entire moment I just described couldn't have lasted more than a second, but in the moment it felt like an eternity. "Are you there?" I heard my grandma say. Remembering to breathe with the phone still at my ear, I decided to go with plan C. I broke eye contact with the clown. "So anyway," I said loudly enough that the clown could hear me. "Yeah, I'm on my way," I continued. "Lopsided squid, what's going on? Is everything okay?" I heard my grandma ask, her voice suddenly filled with anxiety. As confidently and nonchalantly as I could, I walked past the sidewalk where the clown was standing, continuing to chat. His head slowly turned as I walked past, watching me until I was out of sight. I ducked into the archway of the nearest building and tried the door, praying it was unlocked. It was. Once I was inside, I slumped against one of the concrete walls and broke down in tears. I explained to my grandma what had just happened. My grandma yelled for my grandpa to dial the campus police on his cell phone so that I could stay on the line with her. I got up and started pacing up and down the empty halls, checking every door and window to see if the psycho clown had followed me. Was he just a stupid kid doing this on a dare? Or was he someone with more evil intentions? Some of the creepy clowns in the news had axes or baseball bats. I had no idea if mine was armed. When my grandpa tried to explain to the officer on the phone what happened and that I needed help, he told my grandpa, "Your granddaughter needs to make the call herself." Apparently, the reason I had to talk to them was so they could be sure the call wasn't just a prank, or some stupid reason like that. The point is that they wouldn't take my grandparents' word that I was in distress. I would have to hang up with my grandma and dial the campus police myself, not knowing if I would survive the night. I told my grandma between sobs, I love you. I love you too." My grandma was also crying. I dialed campus police and told them who I was and what had happened. The officer on the phone sent several other officers to find me while I stayed on the phone with him and gave him a description of the clown. As I was talking, I heard a door open. I froze. Was the clown here? Did he find a way in? A tidal wave of relief washed over me as several officers came striding down the corridor. They walked with me back to my dorm. As soon as I was inside, I locked my door and window and I shut the blinds. I called my grandma back to tell her I was safe. After talking a little while longer, we said goodnight. Since then, I've made a few friends at school. While I'm in a better place now, I don't go out alone after dark anymore. As for that creepy clown, let's not meet again. 3. About a week ago, I was leaving my boyfriend's house around 2 a.m. I should have just stayed over, but I had a busy day the next day and wanted to go home and sleep in my own bed. So I'm maybe 5 minutes away from his house when I'm stopped at a red light. A car pulls up in the next lane to me, and an old woman motions for me to roll down the window. She looks scared and frantic, and she's just an old lady, so I roll down my window. Only after I start to roll the window down do I see someone else in the passenger seat. It was dark, but I could make out enough to see that it was another woman. It looked enough like another old woman, so I didn't think much of her. Once my window was about a quarter of the way open, I wasn't going to roll it down any further. They start talking. "My daughter just got in an accident, and I need to get to the hospital, but I'm about to run out of gas. Please, I just need anything you have. I need gas. I can't get there." Now, the hospital is very close by. I didn't realize it at the time, but the hospital was closer to where we were than any gas station. If she'd turned right instead, she would have gotten to the entrance of the hospital in 2 minutes, maybe less. But that's not what I was thinking. Here was this old lady who seemed frazzled and frantic, and worried, and I thought about how my mom can get crazy in high-stress situations. I told them I didn't have any cash on me, but there was a gas station maybe 5 minutes up the road, but it was late. I said I don't know if it's still open. The woman in the passenger seat immediately said, "It is. Could you meet us there?" This was my first real indication that something wasn't right. How would she know that it was open, and why was she so quick to answer? Why wouldn't they have any money on them? At this point, though, all I thought they really wanted was money. I didn't want any trouble, so I figured I'd go and get them a $20 from the ATM and be on my way. Besides, what if her daughter really was in an accident and they really did need the help? So I start driving, and I start to call my boyfriend, just so I have someone on the phone who knows what's happening, just in case. By the third time he doesn't pick up, I'm getting worried. I call another friend, she doesn't pick up either. I can't have no one know where I am. I plan to myself that if no one else is at the gas station, that I will pull out and speed away. I probably should have left anyway, but again, I didn't want any trouble. I figured I'd give them money and that would be that. We pull up, I see 2 cars in the gas station, and one girl outside pumping gas. I feel a little better knowing people are around, so I park right in front of the little gas station store. The 2 old women pull up to the gas pump nearest to me. The old woman I talk to stays in the car with the car running, while the other woman gets out and starts walking towards my car. Now is when I panic. This other woman, who I couldn't really see in the darkness at the light, was not very old and was big. I don't mean fat, I mean that she looked very strong. She was much bigger than me and was walking towards my car with a smile on her face. I open my door and yell at her to stay back, to stay near the car. She stops as I get out of my car, and I tell her that I'll get money from the ATM, and that will be it. At this point, the other cars had pulled away, and I'd rather be inside with the cashier than out here or in my car. She begins to walk towards me again, saying that she really needs some money for parking at the hospital and that our friend is very hurt. Please. Their story changed. This was obviously not right. I yell at her again to stop walking. that if she came any closer I'd call the police. She walks back to her car, and I run into the gas station store. At this point I'm crying. I try to tell the cashier, but there seems to be a big language barrier, which isn't helped at all by my crying. The man then comes into the store and I tell him what's happening. I tell him I'm just going to get money from the ATM and give it to them. And I just want them to leave me alone, and I ask him to please make sure I get to my car. He seems very sympathetic and walks me back out to my car. He tells the woman to stay away from me, and he even offers to give me 20 back. I say no and thank him for making sure I'm okay. I get back in my car and pull fast away. It's over, I think. I come out of the parking lot and I have to wait at another red. I can still very much see the gas station and the woman's car. I watch as the woman goes back into her car with the money, and they pull away from the pump without getting gas. I panic as they pull up right behind my car at the light. At this point, my phone is almost dead and I'm trying to call everyone I know. As the light turns green and I drive down the road past the turn for the hospital, I am horrified to see that their car is still behind me. At this point, I'm thinking only the worst things happening. I don't have enough battery on my phone to call 911 and be able to explain where I am. Instead, I turn my brightness all the way up and try to show me on my phone through the back window in the hopes that they think I'm calling the police. I guess it worked because thankfully they immediately turned and stopped following me. I drove all the way home doing 80 and crying my eyes out. I didn't stop for a single red light. I'm not sure exactly what these women were after, but I felt that they had truly evil intentions, and that it didn't stop after the money. I know it wasn't smart of me to start talking to them in the first place, but when you think it's just an old lady needing help, it's hard to think that she could be thinking of hurting you. I hate telling people to not help others. But if it's dark, trust no one. Stay safe, my friends. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 325. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Right, where was... Oh yes, pick up from where we left off yesterday in my boring story. Right, you may want to get a cup of tea. Now, as I was saying, as you know, I had injured my leg a little bit, so I can walk around the house and everything, got him down to the local shop, but I'm not going to be walking up and down the street, and I'm too cheap to pay for a taxi. Besides, it's probably going to cost about the same as paying for a taxi as it would be to get the groceries delivered. So, I was thinking of getting them delivered. I figured to myself, well, I'll just go to this one place. I won't keep saying the names, it's not really important. But then I thought to myself, well, I always go there. If I'm out and about, that's one of the 2 main supermarkets in my local town. But they also do deliveries. The other one, for some reason, doesn't, which is odd, but they don't. Then I decided, well, if I'm going to get it delivered, I may as well go someplace I wouldn't ordinarily go. So I thought to myself, right, I'll go to this other place. I remembered I'd registered there ages ago and ultimately never actually done a shop. So I tried to log into my account, and it was locked. The account was locked out. It was locked out. I was like, what? What the hell's happening with this? I literally never placed an order. I just set the account up. And because we live in a very advanced age where everything's done online, I had to actually phone them up and wait in a queue to figure out what the hell was wrong. And eventually, after a few minutes, I got through and I spoke to one of the people. And the guy said, oh, no problem, okay, I'll unlock your account. Can you tell me why it was locked? No, not really. Well, that's helpful. And he apparently unlocked the account and said, right, well, we'll send you a temporary password so you can get into it. And that was hours ago. I'm literally still waiting on the temporary password. So I thought, screw it, you obviously don't want the money, so I'll just go to one of the other places. So that's currently where I am right now. Going between either one of the 2 major places that actually deliver to my area. There is quite a popular online store that I've looked into, but they don't actually deliver to my area, which is rather annoying because I wanted to try them. But anyway, I'll get it sorted. I'm sure I will. And with that, I shall head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.